This podcast is sponsored by Metro Bank. Relationships are important and everyone deserves a great experience through their financial journey. Metro Bank's service is built upon human connection and real long-standing relationships, whether it's face-to-face, over the phone, online, or on the app. Speak to the Metro Bank team about your personal or business banking needs. This is relationship banking. Hello and welcome to the Wisden Women's Cricket Weekly podcast. It's Christmas time and it's nearly the end of another year. So this is our big fat year in review show where we'll be picking our moments of the year. I'm Yaz Rana and with me today are Katia Whitney and ESPN Cricket Info's Valkyrie Baines. Valkyrie, great to have you on the show, especially given how close we are to Christmas.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. And we've had a great year of women's cricket. So I'm really looking forward to unpicking that and looking ahead.
Right, I must admit that my first thought when trying to think about moments of the year was just realising how long the year's actually been. I can't believe that the entirety of the Ashes was this year. We started 2025 with Heather Knight as the England captain, John Lewis as the England coach. We're going to go through this. We've got different categories to go through, and we'll go through them one by one. We're going to start with Player of the Year. Katia, who's your Player of the Year?
So I had a hard time picking. I considered Laura Wolfart, not just for what she's done in the last few weeks, but because she's had an outrageous year. I considered Nadine Declare. I considered Alana King, but my Player of the Year is Smriti Mandana. And the best way to really illustrate how good she's been is to reel off the record she's broken. So bear with me. The most ODI runs of any woman in a calendar year, she scored 1,362. The first woman to score 1,000 runs in a calendar year. The first woman to score 5 ODI centuries in a calendar year. The highest ODI strike rate of anyone to score more than 750 runs in a calendar year. The most 6 ODI sixes in a calendar year. And I haven't even finished yet, but I can't actually go through more than that. She scored that I was trying to think about standout innings from her, and the one that I kept coming back to was that T20I 100 she scored against England in the first match of the series when India came over. And it stood out to me because it completely shattered the illusion, or not the illusion, but it completely shattered the progress that England had made against the West Indies in that series beforehand. And it illustrated the gap between players who are outstanding and the best players in the world, and the players who are playing for England at that time. And it was an incredible innings. So I kept coming back to that. And also she stood up in the biggest games of the World Cup. So she started the World Cup not that well, and there was kind of a bit of confusion over she'd been so good against Australia in the series beforehand. And as the World Cup went on, she got progressively better and she stood up in the biggest games. And also her record against Australia this year is absolutely insane. So she played 5 innings against Australia, and in only one of those innings did she fail to get past 50 in ODIs, and she scored 200, which is utterly insane. So she is my Player of the Year.
Nice. Yeah, that's a pretty compelling case. Valkyrie, who you gone for?
So I thought that was a good shout, Smriti Mandana, and like Katia, when you mention her, my mind goes straight to that innings against England. But I did, in fact, go for Laura Wolfart. Her stats this year, particularly in one-day cricket, are just incredible. And as you mentioned, she's had a couple of good weeks just recently. So 300s, I think, this month. She's got 2 in ODIs and 1 in T20s. They were against Ireland. And that was maybe the slight caveat I had against picking her. But if in terms of opposition, but if you look outside of that, she's had a stunning year. So 600s in all, 5 in ODIs, 1 in T20s, that one I mentioned there against Ireland. She is the youngest to 13 ODI tons, and she's snapping at the heels of Smriti Mandana and Meg Lanning for the most ever. So her other opponents in getting hundreds this year were Pakistan in Pakistan, that was in September. 169 versus England in the World Cup group stage, as we know, and 101 against India in that World Cup final. So she's had sort of wonderful form at the back end of this year, and that augurs well for the coming year ahead. But also too, I think we need to talk about her leadership. She's been at the helm of South Africa for a little while now, taken them to 2 World Cup finals, the T20 one last year and the one day one this year. And whilst, you can look and say, oh, South Africa have made 3 World Cup finals in a row now and they can't get over the line, 2 under her leadership. I get a sense that something good is really building for them. I'm looking on sort of the more positive aspect, and not that they get to the big stage and haven't been able to bring it home yet, but more in the sense that they're certainly heading in the right direction. They're making progress in a very short space of time. And we have got another World Cup ahead in not too long, and I'm sure we'll talk about that soon. But I feel like things are going in a very good direction for South Africa under her leadership.
Yeah, I also think with South Africa, I think the women's team sometimes gets unfairly lumped alongside the men's team when it comes to not getting over the line on the biggest occasions, because we talked a lot about this during the World Cup itself. When you look at the infrastructure around South African women's cricket compared to the teams they're directly competing against, it's kind of mad that they are consistently getting to semi-finals and finals. So for me, I just think that they shouldn't be criticised for not getting over the line. I think it's a massive overperformance for them getting there. And Valky, you mentioned her leadership ability as well. She's not necessarily someone who strikes you with the most traditional, conventional leadership traits, and she's not particularly outgoing. She's quite reserved, but she seems to have a real control over that side now, and they've got a really good team spirit too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that, I guess, blueprint as a captain, or what we think a captain should be, it's in the women's game, it's sort of been thrown out a little bit. Look at Nat Sciver-Brunt, new captain of England this year. She's in a very similar vein. She seems to command the respect of her players for the fact she is so calm and understated and not in your face. So that seems to sort of be appreciated by her players. And I think Wolfhard is another one. Yeah, and just in terms of Laura Wolfhard and in the context of the South African men's team, I get the sense that she's getting recognition outside of cricketing circles. I have to credit my colleague Firdaus Munda for bringing this to my attention. She's based in Cape Town, and there's a magazine out there called The Continent who named Laura Wolfhard as one of their Africans of the Year. And I think she was the only sports person on that list. So that's over and above the achievements of the men's team over there. That's, over and above, a lot of other sporting achievements coming out of there. So it looks like, she is getting recognition outside of cricketing circles over there.
And we were talking about cricket that's happened in the last week or so. Laura Wolfhard is in amazing form, 200s in as many games against Ireland at the moment. And Katia, India are underway as well against Sri Lanka. First game of that series went. Relatively comfortable win for India?
Yeah, a relatively comfortable win for India. Jemima Rodriguez scored another half century. I was really interested in the Sri Lanka squad for that series as well. You still had the older names that you would expect, like the Chamari Atapatus and the Vishmi Gunaratnes, but you also had a younger turnover in that squad as well. So you had Gimhani, who is that ambidextrous spinner who we've talked about before on the show as someone that we're excited to watch. And it looks like Sri Lanka are starting to look to the future in terms of building the side with a view to the T20 World Cup next year, but also looking beyond Chamari Atapatu, who is not going to be around for too much longer. So yeah, India won that match comfortably, as you would expect. But it's really interesting to look at that Sri Lanka side and follow what they're going to do over the next year and how that period is going to go for them.
So when we were picking our players of the year, you two did your homework first, so you got your names in early. So I was like, okay, hang on, those are just two objectively the correct answers. I was trying to work out who is third. I suppose I'm biased because India won the World Cup, so I think I was always going to go towards an Indian player. I think maybe Dipti Sharma. I think for her numbers across both bat and ball were phenomenal over the entire year, and also fulfill such an important role in that side. But I think it's quite interesting. You see it in different sports when you have two players, similar-ish ages who are above and beyond the rest at the moment. It's quite a cool thing to watch. There's almost an extra element of competition because both of them are breaking batting record after batting record.
I think it's interesting that none of us have gone for Jemima Rodriguez after that innings in the World Cup semi-final, and she also averages over 50 this year in ODIs. But I think it kind of speaks to how consistent both Wolfhard and Mandana have been, that none of us have had that conversation about putting Jemima Rodriguez in there.
Yeah, I mean, we can go straight on to Rodriguez because her 100 was my moment of the year, which is our next category. I think both from the cricketing significance of it. I think we talked about it a lot on this podcast of like how beatable were Australia, and none of us said that Australia were unbeatable. I did think it was unlikely for them to lose a game like that, though, when they score 340 and it looks like it's going really well for them. It was the one time this year that Mandana doesn't get runs against Australia. She's out for 24. India are 2 down early on. And so for India to win that game from there is an amazing cricketing story. And then the human story of Jemima Rodriguez, someone who was left out the side earlier in the competition, to put in that performance, the reaction not just from her when they win the game, but also from the crowd that just goes absolutely mental, was amazing to watch. For me, that was the moment of the year, even more so than the World Cup final. And also the candidness with which she spoke about her personal troubles off the game as well, which was a very cool thing to see, and I think is one of many reasons of what makes Jemima Rodriguez such an amazing role model in the game too. So that was my moment of the year. Valkyrie, you went for the final, which was probably the more obvious one.
Yeah, absolutely. So my moment of the year was indeed India's World Cup victory. I just think, what it could mean for the women's game in that country and globally is just so important. And, you know, it was the maiden World Cup victory for their senior women's team. They had been expected to win it a long time prior to this. And the fact that they could deliver on the biggest stage of all, on home turf, having, you know, got past Australia in that semi-final. And that was actually a bit of a surprise to me, in the sense that I think I just got comfortable with the idea of Australia being so strong. And I had actually, prior to the tournament, tipped an Australia-India final, and it didn't sort of work out that way. So I guess in hindsight, it's not that surprising that India, made it past Australia. But, you know, once I sort of got over that, it was then, can they actually do it against one, you know, South Africa, who had, you know, that big game experience that we'd already talked about in making global tournament finals, but also under the pressure and expectation of a home final. And the fact that they did it, I think it was just huge. And it seems to have really, again, we talk about recognition outside of the game, it seems to have really boosted their profile. We've seen stories from players that were in that team talking about the opportunities outside now. I think Shafali Verma's talked about opportunities to go on reality shows. She appeared on a really high-profile quiz show subsequent to that victory. And also she was one of 4 India players that were on the cover of Vogue India immediately after that World Cup victory. So, it feels a bit like the sky's the limit now for the recognition for this team, and actually what it can do to encourage even more depth if India actually need it. But, you know, to bring the next generation through now that they've got that platform.
Yeah, I mean, Katya, I feel like it's one of those moments that when we look back at the women's game in 10, 15, 20 years time, this will be one of the main standout ones. That's how big it was. This wasn't just a moment for this year, but one of the moments for a long period of time.
Yeah, and I remember coming into the studio the next day and thinking, how do we talk about this final in the context of Indian women's cricket and what it will do for women's cricket in India? And we didn't really know how to talk about it, because it felt like at the beginning of the World Cup that the World Cup wasn't really breaking through in India. And speaking to the India team as well, it didn't really feel, especially with the scenario around ticketing and not really knowing where the games were going to be, and then the games were rescheduled. It really felt like this World Cup was going to be a missed opportunity for India. And the fact that the India team during that tournament went down to a place where they almost didn't qualify, or there was a possibility that they weren't going to qualify for the semi-finals, to come back and win it, that was essential to this World Cup really having an impact in India, and having Rodriguez do what she did in the semi-final and then having India come through and win that final. You know, South Africa winning it would have been a great story, but I think it was really important for that World Cup that India won it. And it was a moment that both that semi-final and that final are moments that are going to kind of be the defining ones from that World Cup that we look back on and think, yeah, that was that World Cup.
I also think as well, it's so nice how a couple of amazing games of cricket can save a tournament, because I think up until that point that we got to the knockout stages, I'm not sure how good a tournament is. I know that on our many podcasts we were speculating who might get into the top four that's not India, England, South Africa, and Australia. And we realised, well, actually, hang on, we keep talking about these permutations, but none of the bottom four have actually won a game yet. And I suppose that, I don't know, we've talked about the format for this World Cup. I'm not a huge fan of it, but boy, did the knockouts deliver. Katia, your other moment of the year is from the 100.
Yeah, so when we were picking moments of the year, like you said, I got in early on these. And I kind of felt a bit guilty that I was taking all of the obvious answers. But when I was thinking about moment of the year, I was actually thinking about what moment brought me the most joy this year. And that was undoubtedly Davina Perrin's 100 in the knockouts of the 100 at the Oval. Probably the most significant moment there's ever been in the history of the 100, watching a teenager come onto that stage at the Oval and completely demolish the opposition against her. And she's we had her on the podcast about a month before that innings, and I interviewed her, and I remember coming out of the interview and saying to Ben, I cannot believe she's only 18. Like, she speaks so eloquently, she has so much passion, and I can't believe she's only 18. And she's one of those players who you've heard whispers about for years and years and years, ever since she became that youngest player ever to get a 100 contract. And you kind of think, well, she can't be that good, or she can't be as good as everyone's saying she's going to be. But that 100 shows, yeah, she is going to be as good as everyone says she's going to be. And if we're talking about the World Cup and moments that kind of broke through onto the wider consciousness, that 100 innings was one that broke through onto the wider consciousness. People who don't follow women's cricket or only follow women's cricket during the 100 were talking about that innings. And it was also her interview afterwards where she talked about how loud her parents were cheering and how she could only hear them in the whole ground, which was really amazing. And I predict next year is going to be a big year for, I mean, it's not an out there prediction, but I predict that next year is going to be a big, big year for Davina Perrin. She's going to make herself she's going to make England not able to not pick her next year. So I think it's going to be an amazing year for her.
Valkyrie, do you think we'll see Davina Perrin play for England in 2026?
Yeah, I mean, she has to, I mean, now be on their radar. She well and truly announced herself with that innings, didn't she? And actually, as you say, Katya, when you picked that moment, I was a bit like, oh, that was like a standout for me too. But, you know, there were others. But absolutely, I mean, what that could mean for her career and potentially for England, because I think the one thing with England, we've seen a massive change in terms of new head coach, new captain, but we haven't seen a lot of changes in terms of personnel. That squad they picked for the World Cup was not vastly different to the one that they took to the Ashes, was not vastly different to the one that was at the T20 World Cup last year. So it raises the question, what's coming through for them to pick from? Davina Perrin is right there front and center. And, you know, if we're looking at now building depth, which, you know, was expected to come through the changes to the county system, which is going to take time. So we need to allow them a little bit of that. But I mean, they've got a player right there who, you know, is saying, pick me. And hopefully they do in the not too distant future.
I think for me, my Perrin moment of the year is actually when we had her parents on the podcast. I think they came on the podcast maybe the week afterwards. And that was probably the most fun I've had doing an interview ever. And then on when did I realise that Perrin was really good? So we have an annual Wisden gear test where we're basically very lucky to be sent lots of bats, gloves, helmets, pads, etc. And we test them out. They're worse things to do for a living. And one year, this must have been 2023 or 2024, a very young Davina Perrin helped us out. And I remember some of my colleagues were feeding on the bowling machine, and she was hitting the ball so hard, and I think she's going to do really well really soon. So yeah, I think it'll be really fascinating. I think it's not very long away, that T20 World Cup, but it must be so tempting to get her in the squad even just for that. I mean, it's not as if England have like the most settled top order in the world at the moment. It's not as if they've had loads of success. And in a home World Cup, I feel like exactly with India, actually, like there are intangibles that can help aside and bring the people with you. And I think the cricketing public, I think, is almost crying out for a new face in this England setup. Just because, as you say, like, new regime this year, sure, but broadly speaking, not a lot of change in personnel. Valkyrie, going back to the World Cup final one last time, your performance of the year was from the World Cup final, and again, it's another story of someone who was overlooked and then takes their opportunity in some style.
Yeah, it was Shefali Verma in the World Cup final. She wasn't even in the side the week before, and then actually helped India get the job done on the biggest stage in a home World Cup. She replaced Pratika Rawal in the semi-final after she had been injured, and she was the player who basically displaced Shefali at the top of the order for the World Cup. Then in the final, Shefali goes out and scores 87 off 78 and takes 2 wickets, which weren't expected. She's, a top order batter who bowls a bit, and she ends up taking out Nadine de Klerk, who'd been seen as really dangerous after she took India apart in the group stages with that 84 not out off just 54 as South Africa beat India in the group stage. So, not only did she top score for them with the bat in that final, but she produced a couple of wickets and a crucial one at that. So she was my performance of the year.
And Katia, your performance of the year was Nadine de Klerk.
Yeah, it was. I actually completely forgotten that Shefali Verma wasn't involved in that World Cup from the start. I think I'd blocked that out and just thought, oh, it's Shefali Verma, of course she will be. But I considered Alana King's 7-for against South Africa, and I also considered Kranti Gould against England in Durham, and I considered Beth Mooney's 100 against India, but I landed on Nadine de Klerk because of how clutch that innings against India was. So as a reminder of that game, now boasts the 2 highest totals from number 8s in women's ODI cricket, because Risha Ghosh came in when India were 153 for 7, or came in when India in the first innings slipped to 153 for 7, and then she whacked 94 and got them up to 251 when they had absolutely no right to get anywhere near that kind of score. And de Klerk came in at number 8 in South Africa's innings when South Africa still needed 109 runs to win. And at the point where she had this partnership with Chloe Tryon, at the point where Chloe Tryon got out, they needed 41 off 25 balls, and de Klerk scored 39 off her next 15 and won it with a 6 and an over to spare, which is utterly insane. And again, if you're thinking about moments, that was another moment in that World Cup where you thought, hang on, I think this World Cup is starting to turn and is going to be a much better tournament than we originally thought it was going to be. And that innings as well nearly put India on a downward spiral, and it was only 2 games after South Africa had been bowled out for 69 against England. So it wasn't just the whole clutch nature of it, it was the arrival of South Africa at that tournament and the start of where they built to the final. So it was a real turning point innings in the game and in the tournament as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely one of the moments of the tournament. Next up, we're gonna soon talk about lowest moments of the year. You might have noticed we've not talked loads about England so far. We'll cover England lots in the lowest moments of the year section. But finally, on the performance of the year, mine one is one that sort of bridges between the two, and it's Sophie Ecclestone in the WPL for UP Warriors against RCB. So a fascinating year for Sophie Ecclestone, in that there's been a lot of talk around her wider place in the England setup. At no point has anyone called into question her ability as a player. She was left out of an England squad at the start of the summer. It wasn't exactly clear why, and officially it was due to fitness, but she was playing domestically while she was supposedly not fit to play for England. You talk to people who are really close to the international setup. People will say that it's knowing Ecclestone and her personality, it wasn't totally implausible that she just walked away from international cricket at the moment. She's one of the very few England players, probably just her and Nat Sciver-Brunt, who command deals, high value deals in every league in the world. A career away from England is possible. And in and amongst all that, she does provide several performances throughout the year that just shows just how good she is. A couple in the World Cup, but one here in the WPL that didn't take place that long after the Ashes. So first with the bat, UP Warriors need 18 off 6, and Ecclestone then hits 6-6-4 that pretty much gets them there. Only forces the game through to a super over, but an amazing job for Ecclestone to force it through to a super over. She is then defending 8 with the ball and concedes just 5 singles, bowling to Smriti Mandhana, and that gets them over the line. An amazing game and an amazing performance from a player who, for all the talk around her, around lots of different things this year, remains one of the very best players in the world. Right, lowest moment. It's all in the Ashes. Valkyrie, do you want to start? Which was the lowest of the low for you?
Well, actually, I just put down the whole series. I mean, and we're talking right back at the start of the year, but just that the fact that England did not put up a contest, 16 points to nil, failed to win a game. I think. I mean, it's fine to say things in hindsight, but I can genuinely say after the first ODI at North Sydney, Lauren Bell came to the press conference and was sort of saying, was very positive and upbeat. And, we made this many runs and I think they made over 200 and we pushed them a bit and that kind of thing. And we played the way we want to play. And sure, I mean, she had to be that way. That had to be the message coming out of the camp after the first game. But it just didn't sit right with me. I'm like, you can't, as a team, be overly pleased with that performance. And then fast forward to the last T20 in Adelaide. And I mean, by that stage, the series was well and truly gone, but England were all out for 90 in reply to 162 for 5. And, some sides might, when the pressure's off and, you can't win the series, actually pull out a few consolation performances and, say, we weren't actually as bad as we have been through this series, but that performance just, well and truly, cemented the result and just showed up how far ahead Australia were for them. Sure, it led to a lot of changes within England in terms of, as we've mentioned, the hierarchy, but still not so many changes with personnel. But then I think their performance at the World Cup showed, that they're maybe sort of starting to turn things around. So maybe from their lowest point, good things will come. But yeah, just the entire lack of a contest in that series was the low point for me.
And Katia, what was your low point?
I can pick out a few moments in the Ashes. As you said, the entirety of the Ashes feels like a low point. And like you said, Yaz, at the beginning of the pod, I'd completely forgotten the Ashes were this year. It feels like such a long time ago now, and so much has changed since then that it feels impossible to have happened this year. But I can definitely pick out a couple of specific moments in the Ashes. The first is the second ODI where England bowled Australia out for under 200, and then you had the entire issue with Amy Jones at the end forgetting to farm the strike and keep Lauren Bell off strike, and then you had Heather Knight come out and say that they needed to be braver with the bat, that felt so completely tone deaf. So that was a low point. And then actually the third T20, specifically because we were doing a watch along with Charlotte Edwards, which feels completely mad now that in that third T20 we were watching along with someone who was going to be England's coach in a couple of months' time, and watching England get bowled out for 90 and hearing her talk about exactly what was going wrong at that time, that felt like such a kind of commiseratingly low. And then also the test match, because catch after catch went down in that test match, and it sealed the 16-0 whitewash. And at the end of that, so it was the next day Australia time, but it was the same day England time, there was a cursed press conference with Claire Connor that felt so completely Ashes disaster, sending the big guns to kind of allay any fears. But it felt like a proper Ashes capitulation of ending careers, massive turnover in leadership. And that put the sealer on it. But yeah, it seems mad to think how low that end of January, February was, the sleepless nights of watching England collapse over and over again. That was, earlier this year.
Yeah. For me, I think you're right to pick out that second ODI because England were in such a good position there, 120 for 5, chasing 180. I guess for me, it's like, obviously we're based in the UK, so we tend to focus more on England, but for me, one of the things I did really enjoy from that series was just how good Alana King was. 23 wickets at 11. And then in that test match, okay, it wasn't much of a contest at all. Like England lose by an innings and what was it? Innings and 122 runs. But that's even with an end of innings collapse by Australia. Like that could have been even worse. And that really wasn't much of a contest, and you felt for the England players at that point, series completely gone. and they were really struggling to stay in the contest. But Alana King was just a joy to watch throughout. It was in the test match where she bowls that delivery to Sophia Dunkley that had people comparing it to the warm ball to Gatting. So even in the amidst all the low moments for England, there was still some very watchable cricket there. But yeah, I think for me, it was that test match where you felt like, as you see in men's Ashes, often when England are more often than not 4-5-0 down at the end of a series, you can sense that the players don't really want to be there anymore, and that's quite a hard thing to watch whilst they're still out there in the field of battle. Finishing on a more positive note, what are we looking forward to in 2026, Valkyrie?
I am looking forward to the T20 World Cup over here in England. Mainly because it's going to be such a big test of so many different teams. So I think it's going to be a big test for the host in how far they've come under this new leadership and post that Ashes woe. I think the World Cup we've just had was probably a bit too soon to be a proper test of that. And as I mentioned, they did show an upward trajectory. They did perform, quite well at the recent World Cup, but they didn't have a lot of time together. They had, just the summer basically, and only a handful of one-day games. They will now have had just over a year together. They've got time. They've got, the best part of, the first half of the home summer to, get some, as we mentioned, maybe some new people in and sort of pick people, on that early form. So, yeah, I think it'll be a big test of the host. I think it's going to be a big test of India now, the one-day World Cup champions. Can they do it in the T20s? We've got a big test for South Africa. Is this going to be the one that they finally get over the line in? And also, too, I think it's going to be a test of where Australia's at, because we've had 2 World Cup finals in a row now, the T20 and the one-day one, where they haven't reached the final. Are they in a little bit of transition? I mean, we have got quite a few senior players in there, and, are they going to bring any, new players in? I mean, it's hard to displace those senior players, but once they've displaced themselves through retirement, what have they got coming through? And we know, they're well known for depth, and you don't doubt that. But are they going to start to maybe blood some new players for the future on the big stage? So I'm well aware there. I've spoken about the big 3 plus South Africa, who will count, in the big 4, even though they don't have the same resources. And so, it'll be interesting to see how the smaller nations perform. But I think it's going to be a big test of those 4 sides, and I'm looking forward to that.
I think we're in a weird place in the international calendar at the moment, just because there are global tournaments all the time. So it's hard to feel genuine excitement, I think, going into a lot of tournaments. But I think this one I am genuinely really excited for. Obviously, again, we're based in the UK, so having a home World Cup is a cool thing. But I also think, Katia, you talked about the ticket situation in India, where 2 months out from the World Cup, it still wasn't clear where to get tickets. It still wasn't abundantly clear where the games are going to be held in some cases. That is not the case in England. This has been a very well-organised World Cup. They've been plugging tickets for well over a year. I think, Katia, you made the point several months ago that if you Google World Cup tickets, the first thing that comes up is actually the World Cup here that was still several months before the World Cup that was taking place in India. So it has been well planned. And yeah, it's been a long time now since we had a World Cup on these shores. 2017 is a long time ago now. The women's game's in a very different place. So I really hope it's a genuine festival of cricket, and one that we can leave it with several good memories, not just of the top teams, but also the other teams too. Katia, what are you looking forward to next year as well as the World Cup?
Yeah, I was about to say the T20 World Cup is the correct answer. Not least because from an England point of view, there's very little international cricket coming up before that T20 World Cup. There's a couple of bilateral series before them. There's also the test match against India that's going to happen at Lord's, which is really, really exciting. But I think what I'm most looking forward to actually is the second year of the county system, which maybe is the boring answer, but I was really pleased by what we saw this year in the county system. And we've talked on this pod about the problems, or the teething problems, that happened this year in terms of the venues being used, the marketing, some of the logistics around it not quite working. But the quality of the cricket, and particularly the overseas players that came over, made it such an exciting year of domestic cricket. And I'm really excited to see what goes on with that next year, particularly with a view to the T20 World Cup. We might get some even more high quality overseas players coming and playing in that system. And I'm really excited what that looks like in a T20 World Cup year and how much that grows. We've also got Yorkshire coming into the Tier 1 setup as well. So I think that'll be an even more kind of successful part of the summer than this year was. Now they've kind of had 1 year of it. So yeah, I'm just really excited for that. Maybe I'm just excited for cricket because it's the winter and the domestic system means that there'll be more cricket on.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, from a player development point of view as well, I think we've seen that as women's cricket becomes more professionalised, occasionally you see stories where an individual takes a really dramatic leap in a short space of time. And with an extra year of professionalisation in a new cohort of players who weren't professional until very recently, I think it's quite exciting to see who might be the next person to have a Davina Perrin style moment in 2026. Again, with an English hat on, I always find it quite interesting seeing what happens in domestic cricket when there are places up for grabs in the senior setup, and I think there are places up for grabs at the moment. Maybe not for 2026, but what happens to the England wicket-keeping spot in the long term fascinates me, and I think there are several players who could stand up and get that gig in the long term if they play their cards right this year. So that'd be really interesting. And yeah, just seeing, I think we saw a lot of young players for the first time last year on the streams, etc. And it'll be really interesting to see who takes that big leap. Someone like Grace Thompson at Durham, who looked really exciting. Could she have a standout year and find herself in an England squad by the end of it? Who knows? But yeah, that's definitely something to be looking forward to. Cool. That is everything for this part of the show. Thanks, Katia. Thanks, Valkyrie. Thanks so much for coming on, especially so close to Christmas. Next up is Lauren with her moments of the year.
So, Lauren, it's been a big year for women's cricket. Plenty that's happened, plenty that we've forgotten, and also plenty that we can remember. We're going to go through, we've got 5 categories to get through. First one is Player of the Year, and I understand you've done this, you've even broken it down even further than just the five categories we've got so far.
Yeah, so I've done well, it's player of the comps really, or like I've done it for each competition. So I've got WPL, 100, World Cup, and WBBL. And I didn't want to go over the Ashes again, so we're not doing that one. So WPL, the player of the year was obviously Nat Sciver-Brunt with 523 runs, and also loved that an English player's dominating one of those competitions, and managed to lift the trophy with the Mumbai Indians once again. So she's my player of the tournament. I think she was actually player of the tournament as well. But yeah, that's who I've gone for first. I've gone for the moment of the tournament has got to be Amelia Kerr's catch off. I think it was Jemmy Rodriguez in the final, the return catch, the caught and bowled. I just turned the game on its screws. Great catch. But yeah, that felt like a moment. And then for performance of the year, I'm actually going for Richie Ghosh, 64 off 27 against the Gujarat Giants. I'm pretty sure she hit like 4 or 5 sixes, like absolutely crunched it. And I just reckon that Richie Ghosh in full flight is just one of the best batters to watch in the game. Like some of the sixes she hit were absolute monsters, and she just seems like a really sort of down to earth. I don't know. She just seems so smiley. She's the kind of player that you really want to do well as well. So I love that. I love that innings. And then the lowest moment, it's not really, well, it kind of is because I know people involved with the organisation and the team and stuff. But Delhi Capitals losing another final has got to be it's got to be like that narrative of just losing in another final. I feel for them all in that sort of dressing room, and obviously JB as coach, Capsy, that just losing another final, and then your team's basically ripped up and started again next year because all the squads look so different. So Meg Lanning's chance at Delhi Capitals has sailed off into the sunset, unfortunately.
Yeah, Risha Ghosh she's fascinating, isn't she? Because actually, when we're talking about things we'd forgotten, before prepping for this, I'd almost forgotten, and I know we're going to talk about the World Cup a bit more, just how good that India-South Africa game in the group stages was. And obviously, Nadine de Klerk is the hero in that game, but Risha Ghosh played an innings that was just as good, basically. And also when it looked like India's campaign was kind of falling apart, and then they still lose that game, but to play with that kind of freedom, and also did she just miss 100 in that innings? But she didn't look like she cared at all, did she? She was just like,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
why she just seems like one of those players that people just absolutely love. Like she's so smiley, she seems so humble. Yeah, and like I said, like her at full flat, like some of those sixes were honestly absolutely huge. And I think the way that she can almost hit sixes over cover as well, I feel like any player that can do that is always really aesthetic on the eye and good to watch.
yeah, nice. So are we on to the 100 now? Is that right?
So we've got the 100. Yeah, we've got the 100. We've got player of the tournament, obviously, Phoebe Litchfield, played the way she did. I also thought Nat Siver Brunt could have got that one again, but I don't just want this to be the Nat Siver Brunt show. um, and obviously ended up winning it with the Northern Superchargers. Well, I've gone for moment of the year, and it's not, well, it probably is a moment, is Kira Chatley's breakthrough comp. Um, Probably just a moment is like the first six that she hit actually was against us, so that's a bit sour. But in the first game at Lords, and I felt like that was just her stamping her sort of authority and talent, I guess, on that next level up. So I've gone for Kira Chatley whacking it at Lords and then having a bit of a breakthrough comp really. I've gone for performance of the year. This is just an obvious one, and it's got to be Dav Perrin in the 100 eliminator at the Oval. Was it 40 odd deliveries? I remember I actually didn't watch that game, but I remember going on to ESPN and being like, "You what? She got what?" Because she'd had murmurs of it throughout the comp, but yeah, that was just unbelievable. And like all her family being there and just like, yeah, it was pretty iconic really for a youngster to whack 100 in a knockout game. And again, it was the way, like some of those sixes were huge off the back foot, were crazy. But yeah, that's my performance. And then my lowest point has to be for little Rihanna McDonald-Gay getting a stress fracture in the 100, obviously missing out from a team point of view for us. But also for her, like I feel like that's the first massive injury that she's had and probably was etching closer to England all the time. Like I just think she's a gun youngster. So to see her sort of get that injury and how devastated she was pretty, yeah, that touched the heartstrings.
Yeah, and having like had a bit of a breakthrough, over that winter as well, like playing the tests and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I just felt like that it's like that tipping point on about to just, absolutely fly, but she's got plenty of time and she's a great, great human. She'll bounce back. But yeah, that was pretty devastating for her because I think a lot of the girls that are just on the fringes of England, like the 100 is the big one, that they obviously want to put their hand up in. So yeah, that was the low point for the 100 for me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that Perrin 100 was close being my moment of the year, full stop, just because it's the kind of performance that I think it makes you realize like basically this is what the next 10 to 15 years looks like, kind of both for her and for English women's cricket. Like you've got like a domestic competition making someone a star kind of by itself, but also just her own trajectory is mad, and just that being like just a confirmation of this player we knew was really talented, And like sometimes those players you get sort of like staging posts along the way, and this was kind of just like a massive step up all in one go kind of thing.
Yeah, I think of it as a lot like, and I think those kind of performances you are quite to get that sort of, I don't know, just turn heads. It often comes in an England shirt, but the way the game is now and the way that cricket is now with franchise cricket, like that was probably captivated as many people as what it would be if you were playing for England. But it makes me think of Danny Wyatt's 100 in Canberra in the Ashes, and it's a lot of it's like the nature in how you actually play rather than where you are, who you're playing against. It's like the style in which you get it, and I just remember thinking like that was the start of her really as well.
Yeah. And then just touching on Kira Chatley, like how good do we think she could be? Because you know, England that wicketkeeper position, there's not been a huge amount of competition for it for a little while, and obviously it's interesting because we talk about Amy Jones has been there for so long. Chatley's in a way she's not that much younger than Amy Jones. You know, it's 6 years, which is obviously a decent chunk, but it's not massive in sporting terms. But do we think that it could be quite soon that we're talking about a potential England spot for her?
Well, I think that Amy Jones goes through waves, doesn't she? I think after she didn't have a great Ashes, but then she's obviously been moved to the top of the order and has gone pretty well in there. You could probably you you wouldn't notice a huge change if she didn't play in the T20 stuff. You know, she's sort of down at 6 and 7. Kira could quite easily play that sort of role. In ODI cricket, she's obviously she's done really well in the last sort of 12 months, really, since Lottie's moved her around. But yeah, I think the next keeper for England's a really interesting one because I think the best keeper by far is Rihanna Southby as a pure keeper, catcher, takes dismissals. But I just don't see a place now where your keeper can't. For me, the way the game is now, your keeper has to be in your top 6 in white ball cricket for the balance of your side. Your top 6, top 7. You sort of don't really want that. You look at somebody like Ellie Threlkeld, who's also probably one of the best keepers in the country, and she's been on England academies and been there and thereabouts for a long time and never cracked it because of her batting. So I think Kira's got a real upside in the fact that she's probably ahead of Southby in terms of her batting and how much that's kicked on in the last sort of year at Surrey. So I think I think it's a shootout of who can be the best batter in the top 6 or 7. And then you throw in Seren Smail. She had a good year last year. She had a reasonable season, the one just gone, but she's not keeping. So if she wants to edge closer to England, then she's got to be keeping. So I think it's a real interesting one, and I think it is a position that needs pressure to be put on because, like as you say, it's not been. Bess Heath was never. She was a destructive batter, but she was never going to bat in the top 6, and her keeping probably wasn't where you'd like it to be. So she was never really pushing Amy Jones, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess one to keep an eye on next year, especially after that T20 World Cup, that could be a time when there might be a bit more renewal. But yeah, on to what was it? What's next? Is it World Cup
World
next? Or
Cup.
is it?
We got
Yes.
the World Cup next. Yeah, World Cup player of the tournament was just Dipti Sharma for. I actually think Dipti Sharma in the last 2 years has just been. She's sort of one of those players that there's so many superstars in Indian cricket. You think of Mandana, Jemmy, Harman, and I never think Dipti gets the credit she deserves, but her performances, even when she was over in the 100, like her performances have been absolutely brilliant with contributions in all areas. Like she'll get a run out with a bullet arm from somewhere or a catch or, and we know what she obviously brings with the ball and the bat. So yeah, Dipti Sharma. But I just wanted to note that I just think she's had a phenomenal couple of years. And then you mentioned it previously as well, Nadine de Klerk's 84 off or 45 versus India at number 8. I mean, she's far better than a number 8. But to ice that game the way that she did, and just like the celebrations, and yeah, it was just an unbelievable effort, a solo effort, really. The thing is, when you're down at number 8, you sort of lose. You've got to manage the lower order as well. So yeah, that was unbelievable, and like what a competitor! Like I just think Nadine de Klerk is made of the stuff that you want in your team. I've gone for performance of the year has to be Jemmy's 100. I just I love the innings for a start, but I just love the story as well. Like, I think sport is made up of stories, and she'd struggled in the first few games and she got dropped. I feel like she's the poor bugger that always gets dropped as well, because she's obviously hasn't got a secondary skill in that team. To bounce back and to do that on the biggest stage under an unbelievable amount of pressure, and then just how much you sort of heard that she was doubting herself and that she'd struggled, and yeah, like that story, that performance. To be honest, I would go so far as to say it's probably my favourite narrative and performance of the year, I reckon. Just when you consider everything that she'd gone through in that tournament and a home World Cup, and yeah, just unbelievable. Loved it. Loved Jemmy, and I love it when good things happen to good people. So that was my performance. And then my lowest point was West Indies not being in the World Cup. I just think that's so sad for women's cricket as well. Like, it just is it a sign of things to come with where international cricket may or may not end up in a few years' time, whereby if you're not one of the powerhouse sort of nations, can you keep up with the rest of the world? So I just thought that was really sad. Like, you think of your Hayley Matthews, your Deandra Dottins, some Stefani Taylor, like those girls not being there was just sad.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we come to my choice, and I've just gone for the whole year, not for comp by comp, but I've got quite a Hayley Matthews theme through mine, and yeah, her not being at a World Cup is just a travesty. And like, just the fact, I think that, I mean, I'm going to talk a bit more actually about that qualifying event later, but the fact that that was so close, that qualifying event where, you had 5 of the 6 teams could all very much have qualified quite late into the competition, and we're taking wins off each other. Like, it felt like the World Cup could easily have supported 10 teams and 12 teams as well, to be honest, I think, and giving Thailand then a bit more of a leg up. And then also you then just get to see some brilliant talents on the world stage, like not just Matthews, but you think of, a Catherine Bryce missing out as well.
Yeah.
Some of the brilliant Irish players as well.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think those World Cups are the things that really support those nations in terms of, like, I know speaking to like some of the Scottish girls, and it's like that has a massive impact on like their funding, their contracts, their coaching stuff. Like, so I completely agree. I don't see why they can't have more teams. Yeah, I just think it's I worry that it's the first sign of potentially things to come, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, that reducing, you're totally right. I think the thing that always sticks out to me when I like remember it and sort of rewatch the highlights and stuff is that like all of the narrative around it, the innings should have been this kind of like almost like this big outpouring and this big release of like tension, and like you sometimes get these things where a player's having loads of troubles off the field and they go up and it's like they're totally kind of freed up and playing like completely like almost like aggressive attacking way, like it doesn't matter. And it wasn't that at all, really. It was because it was so kind of controlled, and you could see that there was kind of a lot of pressure on it, but that she was also the only one able to handle it in some ways. Like, even there was a moment right at the end where I think Amanjot lofted it over the infield, and everyone thought it was the winning runs, and then it plugs, and they still needed a couple to win. And it was actually Rodriguez in the middle just telling everyone to like keep calm when everyone else kind of losing their head. She was the one who was like totally calm, and then just like completely collapsed when she realized what she'd done when the winning runs were hit. It was, yeah, just amazing. And yeah, the Nadine de Klerk one, I mean, and we've talked about it before, but just an amazing story just through her career. I mean, won't retell it now, but go and look at it from the yeah, through everything she's been through. It's yeah, it's quite the tale.
Yeah, no, two unbelievable, and they're the kind of performances that you just remember for a long time, don't you? So yeah, love both of those. And then we've got the WBBL. There was the one that was easiest because it was fresh in my mind. I'm gonna go with Elise Perry. Just her consistency with how Elise Perry and Beth Mooney in this comp they're just freaks of consistency. Like in T20 cricket, it's not easy to be consistent. I think they play low risk cricket in a way. But yeah, those two are just total freaks over here in Australia in the WBBL in terms of just the volume of runs that they score. There was two moments. Is Meg Lanning's 100 against the Sixers at North Sydney has to be up there. But there's also Kiva Bray, who's the youngster who took a hat trick and didn't realise she took a hat trick, which was almost her reaction was as good as the hat trick itself. She didn't know she'd taken it, and then the girls were getting around her, and she realised. So I've got those two as sort of the, I guess, moments or performances. But Meg's 100, I think as well. Meg's shift in T20 cricket over the last sort of 12 months has just been amazing to watch as well. Obviously, saw it firsthand in the 100, but then seen it materialize again in the WBBL. I've got a moment, and it's not. I've got Erin Burns returning after being a mum, and literally having to go and breastfeed between innings and fly around with this little newborn, which is not necessarily an on-field. It is an on-field achievement in my eyes, but just an amazing story, journey. Like a good friend of mine, but also like I don't think she was necessarily set on returning, and then to actually go, oh, my body's good, I'm going to give this a pretty good shot. I just think that's an awesome story, and also fair play to Cricket Australia and Cricket New South Wales for like their support with that as well, because I think the stuff behind the scenes, like flying her mum around, obviously like all the support that goes into that away from the game. I just think it's a really cool story. You don't see that much of it in women's cricket, in women's sport really. So yeah, that was really cool seeing her back playing so quickly after giving birth. I got Villani getting her moment, winning, and then announcing that circle where she sort of said, "This will be my last season. I'm bowing out a champion." Yeah, just the time and energy that she's put into the organisation there at Hurricanes, and for her to get that sort of winning moment and then say, "That'll do." In terms of performance, it's got to be Lizelle Lee's in the final. Like she just iced the game probably within the first 6 overs, really. And she got 77 off 44. And then her son presented her with a medal, which was a lovely touch. So, yeah, Lizelle Lee's, that innings was just the difference, really. I think everybody else sort of struggled, and she just came in and played on a different surface. And like I say, she iced the game in the first 6 or 7 overs, really.
Yeah, nice. Do you have a low moment or not really?
Well, low moment, Brisbane Heat not winning a game, I'd say. I didn't write that down, but it's easy to come up with off the top of my head. Yeah,
Yeah, I shouldn't have
yeah,
pressed you for it. You got a point though. There was a no result in there.
yeah. No, it was a rough season, but that's okay. It'll be a turning point, I think, which will be good.
Yeah, yeah. Only one way to go from here.
That's right. And then yeah, sometimes like with when it goes so horribly wrong is you do reflect a little bit deeper, and I think it will be a little bit of a turning point for the group. Obviously, I'm around this group a lot with Queens End stuff as well, so I think it'll be a moment. I think you sort of have these big shifts in teams where you reflect a little bit deeper and maybe do things slightly different to previously. So I do think it'll be a tipping point in a positive way.
Yeah, that is interesting actually. So does that process start sort of as soon as the season ends, or do you kind of
Yeah, pretty much like as soon as the tools go away within a few days, because I think it's always better to you want a few days to take the emotion out of it, but you want it to be fresh enough where you can actually review logically what's happened, any things that stand out that sort of maybe shaped things going the way they did, etc. So it happened within a week or so of finishing. So yeah, it's something that you do sort of reflect on pretty quickly and deeply too. Like there's no point icing over it. I think there's a lot of things that went against us, no doubt, with injuries and reshuffles, but I think there's a few things that could have maybe done differently as well.
yeah.
And then yeah, just looking forward. I'm looking forward to the WPL because it looks like a completely different competition this year. And I think the 100 will be the same in terms of it's just complete restructure of teams, really, isn't it? And the team identities. I think I'm looking forward to seeing how UP Warriors go with. Obviously, they got rid of the whole house, really. It was a demolition job there, but yeah, just looking forward to seeing hopefully more even competition where new teams, like I'd love a Gujarat to do well or a UP to do well rather than it just becoming boring and the same teams doing the same things year upon year. So that's like the WPL and the 100. Like I'm interested to see what the 100's going to look like in terms of team structures, where people are going to end up, etc. And then obviously a T20 World Cup in England. Like I hope that Lottie and the girls get up and perform well on home soil because I think they're so special World Cups in your own country. So yeah, really looking forward to the T20 World Cup. I think as well, like I watch girls play over here, like I watch like your Sophia Dunkleys and your Danny Whites and the WBBL, and I'm like, we've got to win something. Like these girls are too good. Nat Siverbrunt, Sophie Eccleston. I'm like, I don't know. Like I feel like me and Yaz had a lot of hope in the last World Cup, but I'm like, there is too much in that dressing room to not give that a red hot crack and maybe do something special and win another home World Cup.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the 100 it's fascinating. I mean, obviously the WPL as well, but I think it's sort of more established in that there's going to be like a restructure of teams, but at least we know, almost what the teams themselves look like. Whereas in the 100 with the private investment coming in, and there's just quite a lot of talk in that, or a lot of talk about that is directed to the men's competition and not enough about like what it means for the women's game. And they say there's like these safeguards and stuff, which is great. And so if the money is spent in the right way, then it could be a really big thing. Equally, if say you get like 6 of the team owners are really dedicated to women's cricket and 2 of them are sort of just paying, doing the bare minimum, then that could really weaken the competition. Or, if it's just if all of a sudden you get a bit more of a separation between the men's and women's teams somehow, then that could be something that's not great for it equally,
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think you've got to be careful with these comps where it's not just the rich getting richer. Your top few players get mega bucks, but actually the rest of it looks quite similar. I think that was the beauty of the structure before, is that you could control that rather than, some teams might pay a couple of players 3 salaries in one, and then everybody else is, sort of, I mean, your team wouldn't be very good because you're probably not going to get, you're going to get outbidded and stuff. But that it's an interesting one. It's Yeah, I always feel like as a player that it's very unknown these auctions, and it's a bit unsettling. But it'll be interesting to see how it all pans out for sure.
Yeah. And I'll just rattle through my choices quickly. And I've got a Hayley Matthews theme. So she's my player of the year. I mean, batting wise in ODI is averaging like north of 50, a couple hundreds, including a brilliant one against Scotland uh, in that World Cup qualifier. That wasn't quite enough to get them over the line, but was a brilliant innings. Then amazing in T20s as well, and also yeah, very good WPL. And also played what I've picked out as my performance of the year, which was that 100 against England in the T20s.
Mm. I thought about that as well. I thought at at Canterbury, at Kent.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, amazing how she just carries teams, isn't it? Like just crazy how. Yeah, I think some people will get yeah like just the ability to handle the pressure and let's be honest, like have all the money on your wicket and just to be able to handle that and perform the way she does is just unreal.
Yeah, I mean that game was still it's a mind-boggling scorecard. It was 100 out of a total of 146. Next highest score is 17. And and I'm just remembering some things like the run out that Grimond had on
Mm,
debut, like the one where she just basically just went for a little wander. Yeah. And like that's the kind of thing she's dealing with, and she's still able to like make them, a half decent team at some point. And then the moment is also Hayley Matthews related, which is the end of that qualifier where West Indies hit. So they needed to do something silly from a net run rate point of view, and they hit 168 for four in 10.5 overs against Thailand, but it wasn't quite enough to qualify them for the World Cup.
mm,
And had Stephanie Taylor, I think, hit four and then six off the last two balls, it would have been because the four would have tied the scores and the six would have given them just enough for net run rate boost. But instead, she just hit a six and that won the game. But Hayley Matthews was the one who knew absolutely instantly that it wasn't quite enough, and that was them out of the World Cup by the tiniest margin. So that's yeah, that's my moment. Not in some just an extraordinary moment. Not obviously not a positive one. Just like a moment where you're like, wow, I can't
just a
believe that.
crazy.
Yeah, and yeah, as we talked about last moment, but yeah, her and West Indies and those other sort of brilliant players not being at that World Cup is a shame, and looks like that should change going forward. But yeah, and yeah, the one other thing I'd add, looking forward to next year, is just a Lord's Test is going to be fun.
Yeah,
So
no, I had that on my list as well. It's going to be great. I'm looking forward to that.
well, cheers, Lauren. Thanks a lot for your time.
All right, see ya.
Nice one. Bye.